Hello and welcome to the Talking NorCal podcast, the official podcast of Active NorCal. I am your host, Zach, and with me here as always, it's Positive Vibes Bob.
Positive Vibes Bob, even though I didn't wear my Positive Vibes only hat today for some reason that you decided to acknowledge that hat when I didn't wear it.
I once again, I came not prepared to give you a nickname today.
Classic Zach move.
Classic me. So today we have an awesome episode of the Talking NorCal podcast. We have John Griffith, an interview with John Griffith, also known as Griff. He is a viral dancing park ranger, conservationist. He's a naturalist at the Humboldt Redwoods State Park. If you haven't heard of him, you'll probably recognize him because he had like a hugely viral video from like 2013 where he's dancing in his conservation getup. He also knows a bazillion things about the Humboldt Redwoods and just an overall really cool guy. So we got into a ton of stuff with him. So looking forward to that interview. As always, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch this full clip on our YouTube page, Talking NorCal, as well as our clips on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Follow us everywhere, Talking NorCal and Active NorCal. Before we begin, we'd once again like to plug our swag. We've got swag both in t-shirt form and personally we have swag. That's right. We have t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, and stickers to get you looking stylish on your next Northern California adventure. You can get 10% off your first order in our store by using the promo code NorCal at checkout. Go to store.activenorcal.com. Use the code NorCal to get 10% off. We also have this very cool water bottle, the Neuroflask. Here, Bob, you're good at showing this off to the camera. The Neuroflask water bottle uses its patented filter to remove 99.9% of known toxins in water to make sure you never run out of aqua in the great outdoors. We're currently offering it at $10 off, not 10% off, $10 off its current price with the promo code NorCal. You can get this great water bottle with a built-in filter for just $19.95. Go to activenorcal.com/Neuroflask, Neuroflask, Neuroflask, or you can find it in our store. And seriously, this is a great product, a great water bottle for the outdoors. The Neuroflask water bottle, go buy it today.
And wait, $10 off?
Not 10% off, $10 off. That's like 33% off. It's a third off the price.
And what was that promo code again?
NorCal. You guessed it right. NorCal. That's all our promo codes. We're really imaginative with our promo codes around here, but hey, it works. Okay, let's hop into this awesome podcast with the Tahoes, hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to do kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.
All right, we are back in our new studio.
We're not back anywhere. This is a new place for us.
Well, correct. Yes, we are in our new studio, and it's been a crazy week for me. I've moved a million things. I moved our entire studio, our office. I moved houses. So it's been wild, and that's why there's zero decoration up right now. And our setup will change because if you're watching us, it looks like we're being deposed right now. Yeah. It looks like those classic deposition videos where you have the white background and an attorney is asking you a bunch of questions. So looking forward to getting this place dialed in, and I'm excited. I mean, it's probably not as I liked the cave, but this is good. This will work, and it's right in my office, and we can get out of the house. So new studio. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a co-working space that you and I have spent some time in before, but we'd never had an actual physical office like this until recently, and we did it for this podcast, and so you could work here. But love this place. Can't wait until we can get things organized a little bit. We were just able to, I literally plugged this podcast machine in an hour and a half ago. So we're still kind of ironing out all of the wrinkles, but it's our new home, the new home of the Talking NorCal podcast. So it's exciting.
It will get looking a lot better. I'm not going to put the brick up.
I was just gonna say, you want to talk about how long it took you to take the brick down?
8 hours. It took me 8 hours to take that wallpaper down, and it looked great on camera, and I'm happy I did it, but boy, was I pissed at myself for having to take down that wallpaper because it was put on this brick wall. And once again, it looked great, and it provided like some nice texture in our background, but it's a pain in the ass to take down. So lesson learned, no wallpaper in here. We have a ton of stuff to decorate it with. We just have to
do that.
Make it look good. So new studio, we're excited. Let's hop right into the topics of the week.
All right, NorCal Notes of the Week. First story, a GoFundMe fundraiser has raised over $300,000 for 5 children whose parents were tragically killed by a fallen redwood tree in Northern California.
Yeah, this happened a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago, something like that, but we weren't able to discuss it yet. And this is it's a wild story, super tragic. Jessica and Jake Woodruff were driving down Highway 199 up in the North Coast when near the Jedediah Smith Redwoods, when a massive redwood fell on their car right in the driver-passenger area, killed them. They were from Wairika, and they had 5 children. Tragic story. I mean, you think about a tree stands there for 1,000 years and randomly falls down when you're driving past it. It's very sad. And so, yeah, this GoFundMe was started for their 5 children who are tragically now without their parents, and it's raised over $300,000. And I recommend anyone who's listening to this to go look it up. It's called 5 Children Left Without Parents After Accident on GoFundMe. And just donate whatever you can, because this is a very sad story. And like I said, the most random tragedy I've seen in the Redwoods in a long time.
Such a tragic story. Freak occurrence. I mean, just imagine how fast you're driving down a freeway, and the timing it would take for a tree of that magnitude. And if you haven't seen it, there's pictures online of how big this tree was. It's the size of the car. The timing was perfectly bad for these 2. It's super unfortunate. The 2 were celebrating Jessica's 45th birthday, so they left their kids behind at a little kind of couples trip. So extremely tragic. Again, if you can go support this GoFundMe, please do. It's a tragic story that we have to talk about.
Yeah, it's so rare that you even. I mean, obviously redwood trees fall down. It's just so rare that you see it happen in this sense. And, this is like some Final Destination stuff. I mean, how random it is for a tree to fall at that exact moment, a tree of that size. And like I said, it's probably been there for 1,000 years. And I mean, super sad for these 5 children. And I don't know if I have a whole lot else to say other than go
fund them.
Yeah, go donate to this, because these, I think the goal is 500,000. They're, 3/4 of the way there. So let's push them up to that goal. So to help these kids and this family out in this just terrible situation.
Tragic story. Okay, let's get to the next story. Wildlife officials revealed that 152 Thule elk died in Point Reyes in 2020.
This is such a fascinating story, because the national parks came out and said they were going to kill Thule elk based on the fact that there's too many of them and they can't cohabitate with the dairy cows that are in the area. Turns out, if you don't provide them access to the resources they need, they'll die anyway. So the Thule elk did not have good forage. They did not have good water, and it ended up killing a bunch of the herd off. And now these officials from the wildlife, from the state or national park, don't have to kill them off. It seems like it's a happy accident, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if
I'll say conservationists are pissed.
Yeah, so What it comes down to, though, is it's not like it's man-made problems that are killing these elk. What it comes down to is kind of like most of the problems in Northern California. It's lack of water. They had poor forage, and that was because of low amounts of rainfall in previous years. The Department of Fish and Wildlife suggests poor forage quality, the underlying cause of these population changes. And although the NPS and CDFW believe the elk population decline are drought related, there's no evidence that the population decline is due to hydration. So it's really more about the plants that they're eating not being able to survive and produce enough food for these elk to eat. So it's another negative thing for a lack of waterfall in Northern California.
So what you're reading, and I've been trying to go through this story and with an open mind, and this is a press release from the Park Service about the Thule elk, which they have to announce, and they estimated that they will allow 350 Thule elk in the area, which was below the capacity that there was in 2019. And so they were going to begin killing them off. Now, conservationists are saying they tried to bring water to these herds, and they were blocked by Park Service. Now, we might not be getting the full story because, of course, each individual group has their own agenda, right? The conservationists don't want any dairy cattle at all, any cows in that area at all. And the national park is sort of having to deal with these leases that were given to the dairy ranches. So it seems like a happy accident to me to you don't allow resources to get to the elk and they die and you're not having to euthanize them. But now the size of the elk is way below what their capacity is, and so the National Park Service is sort of off the hook. I just feel like in this super controversial story of the Thule elk in Point Reyes, the National Park Service got sort of a free pass, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's never a good story to see the local wildlife declining. But yeah, as you mentioned, they were going to have to try to do some drastic measures in order to change the numbers there, and this kind of did help things. But yeah, I mean, it's just I don't like seeing stories that is just, not enough rainfall, more things die, or fire. It feels like that's pretty much all we talk about nowadays.
I guess my question is, and it's not brought up in this press release, is if these elk had access to the water in the area, to the good water in the area, right? Like how much of their blockage from the dairy farms area is causing them to not be able to access clean water?
Well, from how I read it, it was more about, not about them not being able to get fresh drinking water. Just the plants that they were eating weren't producing enough leaves because they haven't had enough rainfall. And so it even says in there, these problems are because of drought, but it's not because the elk weren't drinking water. They weren't dying of dehydration. They were dying of starvation because the plants that they eat weren't getting an adequate enough amount of water in order to survive. And so those plants die, the food source of the elk die, i.e. elks die.
Yeah, I guess I'm just suspect of the whole thing because it has become, and it has become like so controversial, and I see a lot of the conservationists online saying like this is bullshit. They did die from lack of water.
Well, we talk about
resources.
The wolves too. These wild animals are dying in this area. Is this natural, or is this because of some maybe man-made reasons? Because it does not help the dairy farms in the area.
Right. What's the true story? And it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? Like, but it just seems so convenient that they died off themselves instead of having the Park Service having to go in and kill them.
Similarly, how wolves disappeared.
Yeah, that's a little different because that's like a random person killing them off, most likely. But you never know. You're right. It's probably somewhere in the middle. So we're going to keep an eye on this because there are some big conservationist groups with big voices who are pissed off about this. And like I said, they have claimed that they attempted to bring these herds water and were shut down by the Park Service. So I don't know the truth behind this entire matter, but we'll certainly keep an eye on it like we have for the past 3 years, because this is a big story in Point Reyes.
Absolutely. Okay, next story. More bears with neurological disorders turning up in Northern California. This is a weird story.
It's weird because these bears, they show up and they're like super friendly with humans, right? And
Or just not scared of humans.
Right.
They're not as timid around humans as they should be.
And when, eventually, when wildlife people get word that there are bears that are friendly around humans, they come in and they check out the bears. And there have been, how many of these bears in the past, there's been 3 of these bears in the past 12 months who have these neurological disorders, and they end up dying.
Yeah, it's a neurological disorder that causes inflammation in the brain. And, when these wildlife experts, capture these bears, they capture the bear because it wasn't timid. It was clearly weak. So they wanted to study it, find out what was wrong with it. And their goal ultimately is to release that bear back out to the wild. But as you mentioned, that bear and 2 other bears in the last 12 months have come up with similar inflammation in the brain because of a neurological disorder that makes releasing them to the wild they're just going to be prey. So it's easier to just kind of euthanize them and to not put that neurological disorder back into the gene pool, if you will. So it's a weird story. I've not heard about it before this. You probably have, but yeah, I was trying to figure what is the neurological disorder, and just basically says there's a name for it. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it.
Or inflammation in the brain, which quoting this, which would make the 3rd bear this neurological disorder due to this brain inflammation pass through the CDFW's WIL within the past 12 months.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is this was last week, and I was looking at our website traffic, and an old article went crazy. And that was an article about a young cub approaching a snowboarder at North Star on the slope, right? The snowboarder's on the slope, sitting down, and this bear comes and starts playing with the snowboarder. And we had written an article on it and posted it back in 2019 when it happened, and people were reading this again because this was one of those bears that it turns out had this
neurological disorder,
encephalitis, I think is how you pronounce it.
I think you did a great job there.
Yeah. And so this bear was super friendly, playing around with this human, not scared at all, and that's why it was kind of a interesting story back then. And obviously the snowboarder should have gone away because you never want to interact with bears like that. But it turns out that this bear had this neurological disorder, and that bear is alive. It's actually down in San Diego, being treated by the CDFW, and I think is in the zoo, Orange County Zoo now. So,
well, and it's not just this swelling of the brain is doing a lot of other things to them, because in this article they talk about how when they got this bear, it was severely underweight, covered in ticks, and it's just they're just kind of oblivious to all of the dangers that are the natural woods or the place that they naturally grow. So it's just they just don't have any defense mechanisms.
They call it dog-like. in behavior. That's what they call their behavior. It's dog-like, completely comfortable around people. And unfortunately, when they were acting like this, people were treating them as such, feeding them. There's a story of out in Pollock Pines of this group, throwing an apple and it would eat it in their backyard. And it's a good lesson. You can't interact with bears at all.
These aren't the bears from like Yosemite that are they've learned that if they come to the cars, they could find food. Those are smart bears. We're talking about bears that have lost all of their natural ability to sense danger, and they're usually younger, so they don't really have a lot of they just don't have a lot of defense mechanisms.
They're also young,
right,
and way too young to be out on their own, which means they either wandered off or were sort of shooed off by their
that's probably how
their
went.
family.
Mother bear just kind of left the bear behind.
But this is like big national news. I saw picked up by a lot of national websites because this is not a good thing.
The biggest deal is that it's because they don't know the cause.
Right.
They don't know what is causing this neurological disorder, which is causing these bears to die. We don't want these bears to die. We love bears.
And these bears who are not scared of humans might end up being in a conflict with humans at some point,
sure,
right? Right now, they're friendly, but it might just be that they're not scared, which could eventually result in something catastrophic for the human who comes across them. So we'll keep an eye on this, but it's we don't know what it is, and it's kind of scary to see these bears doing what they're doing. So hopefully they get to the bottom of it, and we figure out how to help them so nothing bad comes of this.
Neurological disorders in bears. Never thought I'd be discussing that.
Encephalitis.
Encephalitis.
Yep.
All right, let's get to a more positive story. Experimental release of 186,000 Chinook salmon performed downstream from spawning grounds on the Sacramento River.
So we've actually heard a lot. This was an idea that's been in the ether for a long time, right? So these salmon are from Battle Creek, where Coleman National Fish Hatchery is, and they come and they spawn there, and they release them back into Battle Creek. And what a lot of salmon, specifically the Golden State Salmon Association is saying is like, why are we releasing them so high up river, which gives, ton of predators are eating these tiny smolt throughout, and they don't exactly know how many actually get down through all the way to the ocean, but the guess is probably not a ton. And of these, they'll release, millions of salmon every year. It's about 1% returns. So they're trying to up that percentage of how many returns. So this is the first time they actually went all the way down to Butte City, and released basically half of their fall Chinook salmon, half in Butte City, half up where they usually release them up on the second near Battle Creek and Anderson. And this is, obviously we're not going to know for 3 to 5 years what this will do for the salmon populations returning. But in my humble opinion, this is a really good thing.
Yeah, it took me a minute to kind of understand it, but once it clicked, it really clicked. The reason that they're not just releasing all of them where they normally, why wouldn't they just release all of them downstream then? Well, they started to release them upstream when there was heavier flows. Another story that we're talking about water levels being lower and how things are needing to change around the Northern California environment because of them. Having the lower levels of water increases the means of predators to eat these smolt and to not allow these fish to survive, to make it to the ocean, to come back. So putting them more downstream from their natural spawning grounds removes a certain amount of territory these predators have to eat these little baby Chinook salmon. And so it makes total sense, and I mean, I can't think of why it wouldn't work. You know, it just eliminates a stretch of water where predators tend
Full
to
of predators,
live, you know?
yeah.
And so I can't see it not working at least a little bit. And so I think it's a great story. Yeah, it just a quote from this: the operation was designed to evaluate if releases in lower levels of the river will help fish bypass predators without increasing straying rates, so they can return back and not stray from the wrong course coming home, you know?
Right. So, I mean, I have a few thoughts on this. First and foremost, so salmon know where they're born, right? This is like ingrained in their body. They have this GPS system, which we have no understanding of, basically. We just know that salmon, no matter what, can get to where they spawned. But if they're released in a different place, will that mess with their GPS? That's my first question. A question we might be able to find online.
No, but they're going to be passing through this area to get to their spawning area, if you will. So maybe they just get there and they're like, well, we're good here.
Right. I just wonder if they don't go down the area between Butte City and Battle Creek, if they actually know how to navigate it, right?
That's a good point.
I don't know the answer to that, and maybe that's why this is experimental, to see if they actually can make it all the way back.
Well, but isn't it kind of the idea that this will be kind of their new spawning grounds?
That's another question. But it's not their spawning ground, right? It's not where they spawned. It is downstream from that.
But it's
so are they going to just stop in Butte City and be like, we have no idea where to go from here, we'll just spawn here? Maybe.
Of forcing nature, resetting their internal map, maybe.
Right.
That's what I assume will happen, but I don't know. I'm not a biologist.
Also, I actually had a long conversation with Mike Rasmussen, the fishing guide who we went and caught massive Chinook salmon with, which was an awesome trip that we had. And he had been saying this all along. And I think a lot of, especially, like, you know, anyone that's fishing for salmon or any fish advocates in Northern California in general are all going to have unique opinions about this subject. And he was saying the same thing. He's like, you're putting these tiny smolts into the river. You wonder why there's massive bass in the Sacramento River, because they are just gobbling up these things as they're coming through, right? And that's why it's, 1% come back. How many percentage are being eaten by the different predators on the way down the Sacramento River? How many are dying in the Pacific Ocean? And then how many are not making it back through these salmon have an arduous journey, But Mike was saying this along, last year when we went fishing with him. He's like, they are putting them right into this bad area where they're just going to get eaten up.
So that brings up a different question. Like, if the moving of those salmon downstream, is that going to hurt the bass population? Are you going to start to see smaller bass in that area that are fished?
Yeah, and I don't think that's a huge concern.
No, not to the wildlife, but to the fishermen, I'm sure it will be.
Correct. But I don't think any fisherman could go out and say, hey, let's have less salmon for more bass. Right. There are some people who love bass, but I think everyone is basically trying to help the salmon populations because they are declining at an alarming rate. So unfortunately, we will not get the results of this experimental release for 3 to 5 years. We won't be able to see how many come back, what percentage, if it grows, if it stays the same. But thankfully, we are trying new things because something's got to give. I mean, these numbers are dropping, and we need to do something to try to bring more of these fish back. And we actually, there was another article we did on the website about how they're doing these huge studies on the carcasses of the fish upstream from Battle Creek, because these fish historically have spawned on the McLeod River and the Pitt River, and now they can't get there because of Shasta Dam, right? And so they'll bypass their spawning ground to go to their original spawning ground historically. So salmon are so fascinating in that regard, like that we don't know what makes them tick, and that's why it's so hard to get them their populations to grow. And it's fascinating, and I hope we can figure it out. I mean, as in our conversation with Griff coming up, he said, look, we can land on Mars. We got to figure out, we're smart enough to figure out these salmon populations. We just have to work on it and put our minds together. And I think he's absolutely right. Like, and Griff actually says this coming up, not to spoil too much of this interview, but he says, if we can't fix our salmon populations, we suck. Like, we suck as human beings. If we can't figure this out, like, what the heck are we doing? So that's hopefully this works.
Yeah, stay tuned. We'll do an updated
in 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years. Stay tuned to the Talking NorCal podcast in the meantime. Okay, let's get to the next story. Boat slips may not happen at Folsom Marina due to low water levels.
This is obviously part of a bigger drought story.
Yeah, we have a lot of them.
Yes, so our impending drought is happening, and we're in April. You never know, April showers. I mean, even May, I've seen some big storms in May, but it would have to be a huge turnaround for us to not be in a massive drought this year. And we've talked about everything from wildfire to farming to everything that comes with a drought. But here is a perfect example of recreation. Folsom Lake won't be able to have slips because the water's too low. And it's incredible that, it's a sad story, and we're back into our like 2015 levels of drought just 2 years after we had like an astronomical water year. But this is just, this is an overall trend of drought here in Northern California.
It's becoming a problem for boat owners because there are more wet slips in that marina than there are dry slips, but those wet slips we're losing them. The water level's going down, so the amount of space to have those wet docks aren't available. And I think there's like only like there's like a third of as many dry spots as there are wet spots. So the more they lose, they're just running out of places for these people to put their boats, and that's unfortunate because who doesn't like to go out on a boat on the river or on the lake? And it's much easier to keep the boat in water as opposed to having to put it out and put it in and take it out every time. So again, another negative story about the lack of water in Northern California. But
Folsom is unique because Folsom is the shape of it makes it really hard to do certain recreational activities. It's not like Shasta, where Shasta's so big that you'll be able to, go skiing or whatever, no matter what. But even at Shasta, it can get low enough to where it's super hard to drop a boat in, right? It's super, you're constantly having to move around the different slips. Bay Bridge is just the one example. Well, they'll move their slips to the complete other side of their resort because otherwise they can't, there's no water. So it is interesting because this is going to open up the lake to more paddleboarding, more kayaking, more, obviously non-motorized recreational stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how recreation is impacted, especially after COVID, when every single person is going to want to go to these lakes. And we're seeing that at every outdoor destination in NorCal. We're seeing this influx of visitors who are looking for a way to get out of the house. By the way, you probably didn't see, there was like a video of like this massive line of cars trying to get to Table Mountain in Orville the other day. And it's just, everyone's trying to get out of the house. Everyone's looking for these different activities that aren't restaurants, that aren't bars, that aren't movie theaters and malls. So we're going to have this competition for space, and yet now we're seeing there's less space.
Yeah, it says there's 685 wet slips at this marina, only 175 dry slips, and they're moving to they're not going to be any wet slips at some point. And that 175 boat area where there's dry slips is not like expanding, and so they're just running out of room for all these people to go have fun. And again, we all want to go out and have fun, so it's just sucks.
I have to talk to my buddy Tim, who has a boat and who goes on Folsom all the time. And he spends a lot to like store the boat all year round and to drop it in and everything. And he's probably not very happy about this news because that's, he pays for it to store year round, but he only goes out there in the summer. And this year is going to be one of those years where you're seeing a lot of articles from us as well. It's pictures of the drought. Are we going to
levels?
Are we going to see the ancient bridges in Shasta Lake? Are we going to see I think there's already one showing in Lake Folsom. There's like this historic bridge that was
I saw that, yeah.
That was full, that was covered with water after the dam was built. So it's going to be one of those years, and hopefully it's only 1 year because we really can't take a whole lot more of this.
Yeah, rain dance all you can. We can
rain dance, yes sir.
All right, last story. Let's end on a positive note. Hiker discovers tree growing over the trail in Redwood National Park. This was a wild, wild picture.
It's so weird that I've never seen this before. So this is in the Redwood National and State Parks. There is a trail. It's the Berry Glen Trail, which connects the Lady Bird Johnson Grove with the Prairie Creeks Redwoods State Park. And this hiker posted this photo of this tree growing over the trail. It had these massive roots that was growing from one side of the trail to the other. And there was an explanation from a forester from the Humboldt State University who said, this tree appears to be a western hemlock or Sitka spruce. Both species of these trees commonly grow in the understory of closed canopy forests and are very tolerant to growing in the shade of overstory trees. I don't know what that doesn't necessarily explain it perfectly for me. I don't know how these roots are strong enough to put this tree over the trail like this. It's amazing.
Yeah, it almost looks like the roots are another tree that somehow grew under this tree and lifted it up, because the roots are as thick as the trunk of this actual tree. It's the same thick width. So it's wild. It's crazy. And you're right. It's insane that we haven't seen this before. I mean, clearly that tree has been there for a long time.
A long time.
Woman is standing under it. I think it's a woman, right? Yeah. And that's just a great picture. And anybody that sees that would obviously see that it's a Kodak moment that you're going to want to capture. So it's wild that we have not seen that story before. Yeah. Octopus tree, she called it.
Yeah, this the hiker was Lyndon Letts, who posted it on Instagram, and I'm sure someone can explain it. Like I said, this explanation that we got is not good enough for me, and as much as I tried looking it up, I couldn't figure it out. But you're right. This thing has had to have been here forever. How it grew over this trail in a perfect way. It's almost like a floating tree almost from one side to another, and you can just hike right under it. And I've never seen a picture of it. I've never heard of it. I've never been on this trail before, so I haven't seen it. But this is one of the most magnificent hiking trails I've ever seen.
You can look at this picture for hours and never really figure it out.
It's more mysterious the more I look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. I'd love if more people found this tree and took pictures of it. Tag us, Active NorCal.
Well, my assumption is now that it's gotten some press that people are going to go here. It's on the Berry Glen Trail. Go hike on this trail, take a picture of it, and tag us on Instagram at Active NorCal, because I want to see some more, sights of this thing. There's just this one photo online that it's the only one I've seen. It's not on any of the websites for the Redwood National and State Park, sorry. And so anyway, this was really cool. Go check out that we have a picture of this on Instagram, but also on our website. Go check it out because it is fascinating.
Wild story. We'd love to hear your guys' perspective on it. Again, you can stare at this picture for hours, and it just kind of brings up more questions the longer you look at it.
Absolutely.
But great story.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. And that does it for the NorCal Notes of the Week.
All right, that's the news of the week. Let's get into our awesome interview with John Griffith, Griff as he likes to be called. He is a naturalist at the Humboldt Redwoods State Park. Overall, awesome guy. Let's go to our interview with Griff.
All right, we'd now like to welcome on a very special guest. He is a naturalist for the Humboldt Redwoods State Park and a man known as a celebrity of the forest, most famously for his viral dance moves. Let's welcome on John Griffith. Welcome to the show, John.
What's up? Call me Griff. I go by Griff. Yeah.
Griff, absolutely. So I want to start with, I love your background, by the way. If you're listening to this, he's got a beautiful redwood tree in the background there in the Humboldt Redwoods. I love what you've done with your live videos this year. During the pandemic, you guys started doing these live videos. And how did you come up with that idea in this series? And what's the response been like?
Well, what's interesting is I just started with state parks like 2 months before COVID hit. So I've been working with the California Conservation Corps, which is a state youth workforce development program, which I love, but I'm 50 now. And so like, I wanted to do the job that I actually went to school for, which is this one. And the position finally came up. So I came up here in January, and then March, all of a sudden we got COVID. And so I was thinking about, like, I had all these like visions of me, like taking people for walks, and looking at fungus and stuff like that during the winter. And then my boss was like, we got to figure out something else to do. And so my boss, Martin Robbins, super cool, creative dude. And he was like, we still want to reach as many people as possible. And we did virtual programs with classrooms anyways during the winter, with kids all around the world. And he was like, well, we're going to do this for everybody. We're going to do Facebook Lives once a week. That's how it first started. We were doing them once a week. So I was like, all right, let's do it. And I had some experience doing videos. So it was kind of cool because I got to start a new job and then instantly be in an arena that I had some experience and was actually good at. So we did that. It's reached so many people. It's blown our minds. We did not expect it to be this successful and helpful.
Well, you mentioned that. I mean, you have a lot of great experience with this stuff, and I think you're just a natural host. But also, you kind of get to work with this great background of the Humboldt Redwoods, which are gorgeous, and there's so much to explore there. I'm curious what life has been like during the pandemic in the Redwoods. I know you guys closed down for a while, and hence those videos, and now you're starting to open back up. What was life like in a state park during the pandemic?
I want to be really careful with this because I don't want to rub it in anybody's face any worse than it sounds. I had an old growth redwood forest to myself most of the last year. And it was a dream come true for me because I've built a lot of the trails here when I was in the CCC. I've done tons of the salmon habitat restoration. I learned how to do salmon habitat restoration in this park 20 years ago. So I've done prairie restoration here. I have a connection to this place. So to have it to myself for a year has been a lot like visiting heaven before you get there. So I'm sorry, guys. I know some of you had a really rough COVID time. I've had a wonderful COVID time. It's been beautiful.
No, that's amazing. And I think there is like this lesson in COVID where a lot of people are getting outdoors and learning about it and learning about, leave no trace. People that didn't know about it before certainly have to know about it now, hopefully. Yeah. You mentioned your experience, with salmon restoration 20 years ago. I looked all over online for your story and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I'm curious about your journey. Where are you from and how did you end up becoming this nature nut?
Well, it starts back. I'll try to make this 5 minutes. You asked me a question where I could do like a whole encyclopedia series on this, but I'll try to do it in 5 minutes. When I had a really big head, which means that I was probably like 3, and I couldn't go down the stairs by myself unless I held my grandma's hand, I held her hand and we walked down the back steps of her mobile home. And she lived in this urban mobile home park. And the whole thing was paved. Okay. You've probably seen those before, except for this little square in her backyard. And my grandma was, she did Depression era and stuff. So that little square was a vegetable garden, but it was also just a flower garden. And she had this like little shady area with a pond in there and some ferns and stuff. And even at 3 and 4 and 5, I can remember that if I wanted to see animals, I had to go to my grandma's trailer park, you know, because I was an urban kid. And my parents did take us, thank goodness, on road trips. Parents, please take your kids on road trips into nature. And so when my grandma took me down the steps and into her backyard, she says, I have a magic power. I can call toads. And I can remember that. I was like 3 or 4 and I can remember that. And I was like, you can? And she did this like ridiculous, like, and she's like, now go look under this pot. And I went, I turned over this broken pot and there was this huge toad and I picked it up and it peed all over me. And I have been fascinated with nature ever since. So when I was 12, I started volunteering at a wildlife care center. And that was an amazing, mostly I cleaned cages and fed baby birds because I was 12. But in 13 and 14 and 15, I did until I was 16. And then unfortunately, when I got 15, 16, well, 14, 15, 16, I became a very angry kid. I had a very weird relationship with a few of the adults in my life, a couple of adults in my life. And I my little primitive brain way of dealing with that was to be extremely rebellious. And so I ended up running away from home and dropping out of school and getting involved in drugs and alcohol super heavily at a very young age, and worried my family to death. And one day someone said, you know, I don't think you're supposed to be a meth head. I think you're supposed to be a ranger out there in nature because you always talk about nature. You should join the California Conservation Corps. So I did. And I got in there and they looked at me and they're like, you need to go to NA. And so they sent me to NA and I got off meth and in 89, 90. And I started planting trees and I started building trails and I started doing habitat restoration and I started building campgrounds for ADA accessible for people who don't have full, abilities. And it felt really good to be helpful. It felt empowering. And so I decided to commit the rest of my life to doing stuff that helps nature and people. And I've been very fortunate to find those jobs consistently since I was 18 years old.
That is fascinating. I had no idea. Everyone's got such an interesting journey. I guess I want to get to your TV show, because that's sort of, it's a testament to who you are and sort of, your personality, and people are drawn to you. And so you had this show on the Animal Planet called Wild Jobs, and you would just go around sort of trying out different jobs with animals. And I'm curious, how did that come to fruition? And I know, your viral dancing was probably a part of it, but I'm just curious, how do you get a job on Animal Planet?
Well, they found me and they were one of many. I was getting hit up a lot because the viral video, because this is back in 2013 when viral videos were relatively rare still. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything about social media. I worked with 18, 25-year-olds. They're like, you need a MySpace and a Facebook and a YouTube because you take all these pictures for your boss, but we want, because we had to take project pictures. We want to see those pictures. And so I was like, I don't know. I like barely know what a computer looks like. And so they like hooked it up for me. And my third video, I think it was my third video on YouTube, was this dancing video that went super viral. And so
7 million views, right?
Huh?
It was about 7 million views, I believe.
Yeah, and it was on all these stations. Like I went to work and Headline News and Good Morning America and the Today Show were on hold to talk to me. And it blew my mind because the day before, Rue Matt from Outdoor Afro, who's another person you should like try to get at least someone from Outdoor Afro on your podcast. But Rue Matt from Outdoor Afro, her and I had been working together quite a bit at the time. And she called me and told me my video was going viral. And she says, you're about to get a huge platform and you need to tell, like, you need to stick with your life message. Your life message is that you've been trying to reconnect youth to nature and to conserve wildlife habitat. She goes, you need to have a few sentences. And so I'm like, okay. So she helped me develop them. And I was thinking, it was going to be like the kind Daily Journal, Las Coast Outpost, and like some local stuff. And it was headline news in Today's Show and Good Morning America. And I was so glad that she called me and we prepared that, because they did try to take me, the reporters did try to take me all kinds of weird spots, but I just spoke my truth. And it was really, really good that she did that for me. So once I had this huge platform, I started understanding how social media works. I was like, I could probably help some birds and some native plants, and I could talk about nature. And so I started making videos, and the videos, some of them got pretty popular. I've let my YouTube channel go dormant since, and I'm trying to wake it up right now. But at the time, I was getting like 10 to 100,000 to 500,000 views per video. And so one of those videos I did about nature, like, got around into the Animal Planet people, and they called me. And when they called me, they knew I had a viral video, but they didn't want to talk about it. That was really refreshing, because pretty much everybody who had contacted me at that time wanted to see me dance. So and next thing you know, I'm doing it's a 10 episode online Animal Planet show that was super fun, and I love the team. It was with High Noon Productions, and they're just some wonderful people. If High Noon Productions calls you and offers you a show, say yes. They're just such great people, and I had a great time doing it, and got to meet all my heroes from like Ohio Raptor Center and down Southern California, and Wild Care in the Bay Area, and just amazing people.
Well, what's that like, shooting a show specifically with these like wild animals? Because I know, like, being on camera, you kind of have to be on, right? And I might not have the personality that you do to sort of be on all the time. And then you're also dealing with like rattlesnakes and vultures and all the stuff you did. What was that like, shooting that show?
Well, almost all of it was unscripted. The only time, like, they would tell me, like, we need a after we'd filmed the whole thing, like, we need a transition, so stand here and say something like this. And I would just like pull something out of the air. And I watch it now and cringe. Just so you know, if I had to do it over again, it'd be so much cooler. But I was still going like, oh my gosh, I have my own show. Oh, pinch. So if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have said so much cheesy stuff. But it was unscripted. So the unscripted part I had, it was the filling in the transition things that like often got cheeseball. But I love animals, and I love people who love animals. I love wildlife conservationists. I love people like that. So I was always really excited to meet these people, and I knew about a lot of them already because I, read wildlife magazines and newsletters and all that kind of stuff. And so I was already like, oh my gosh, I'm your biggest fan. And they're like, oh, cool. So it was really fun. And, probably the scariest part, I went to this place called Animal Tracks. And what they do is they, when the cops go and they like raid some drug lord's mansion and find that he has 7 tigers and 26 monkeys that all have been caught out of the wild or whatever, not legal, not permitted, whatever, they take him to these sanctuaries. And so one of those sanctuaries is called Animal Tracks. And I loved those people. And so when I got there, one of the first things I'm doing is I'm bathing this monkey. And that was like the coolest thing ever. And I put a diaper. I tried to put a diaper on it. It wasn't successful. But then this baboon got in my face. And the baboon got like right in my face. And I thought for sure it was going to bite my face off. And so it was like me trying to be as calm as possible, because I was like, I ain't gonna go out like no bee on TV. Like, I'm gonna take this bite with a straight face. It was scary, but that baboon ended up being a really cool baboon, and we hung out. I petted her and stuff, and it was almost like she had a crush on me, and like she wanted to hang out with me a lot. So it was a cool experience.
What, from what you witnessed, what was the hardest, quote unquote, wild job that you saw?
Well, we did 10 others that never got on, 10 other shows. There was one that should have got on. I can't believe they didn't put it on, but it was, I was at the Navajo, working with the Navajo people, and we were trying to catch their sheep. And that was probably the hardest because I was like rolling around and holding on to sheep. It was crazy. But out of the ones that made it online, let's see, that's a tough one. Probably the rattlesnake one.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, and they didn't show some. The editing cracks me up because we would film all day long, and then it's like 15 minutes of film, you know. And one of the things we did is we stuck this like transmitter up the rattlesnake's butt, and that I can't believe they didn't show that. I don't know why they didn't show it. Maybe they thought it was too much, like it would piss animal rights people off or something. But they track rattlesnakes, but the transmitter that we were using was we put it up his butt. So we would catch the snake, put it in a tube, and then put these transmitter up the butt. And the rattlesnake already looks pissed, you know, because they don't have any eyelids. That's why, just as an aside, you guys are afraid of snakes. The reason why you're afraid of snakes, believe it or not, really think about this, is because they don't have eyelids. So just imagine if you went outside and you saw your neighbor and he was like, you'd be worried about him too. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, snakes already look pissed. And then when we put this transmitter in their butt, they looked extra pissed, like trying to shake its tail, but it couldn't because it was in a tube. I felt really sorry for him. And I was like, man, do not drop that tube. do not drop that tube, because everybody's getting bit if you drop that tube.
You're right. I mean, probably my fear of rattlesnakes isn't, it's not with sound mind. I think it's the noise they make, right? Because you could be stepping over a rock, and this has happened to me a couple times, and you just hear that noise, and you have no idea where it's at. You just know you got to get the hell out of the way.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for their rattlers, right? Because they're warning me, like, get the hell out of here. But at the same time, that's the scariest noise you're going to hear in nature.
It is. And you know what? This guy has stepped on over 200 rattlesnakes, and he's used cold legs, hot legs, and real legs. And the results are all the same, because people are always like, oh, you can't use a fake leg and see if they're going to strike it because they use their heat sensing. They only use that for hunting. But rattlesnakes don't want to bite. Losing your venom is a very expensive process. And if you bite someone and you lose a bunch of your venom, you might not get enough back to feed yourself. So rattlesnakes hardly ever bite. I think it's like out of like 300, 3 snakes actually struck, the ones that he stepped on. So we probably walk across and by and come within inches of rattlesnakes all the time and don't know it, because being cryptic, being camouflaged is their first line of defense. And then they rattle. And I want to just clear up another wives' tale, because I love to clear up wives' tales. No, rattlesnakes are not evolving to lose their rattle. That would take thousands of years. And rattlesnake killers, like profound rattlesnake killers, have only been in this country for like 150 years. So they're not evolving to be rattlers. Rattlesnakes don't rattle most of the time. Okay. So it goes cryptic, hide, and then rattle, and then strike.
I've always been curious of this, and I just thought of this. You're probably the best person to ask. If I get bit by a rattlesnake, and as you said, it's really rare to happen in the wild, what do I do? How long do I have? Like, what's the process?
You know, I am not the expert on that, because it's been a long time since I thought about this, but I'll tell you right now that, like, you need to call 911 as soon as possible.
Sure.
Because you cannot depend on it being a false strike. Like, I've heard people doing that, like, you know, oh, it was probably a false strike, I thought, and then an hour later it swelled up and got crazy. So it's like, I think that, like, if you're out hiking and you have no choice but to walk back, start walking. If you don't have reception or something, like if no one's going to find you, like, you're going to have to get yourself out of there. And like, you can try to, if it's on your leg, you can try to like tie down there to like temporarily stave off the venom from going through your body. But I don't know how well that works. It's mostly about getting communication, getting to where you can get some anti-venom, because, you know, people don't often die of rattlesnake bites. And dogs rarely do. Dogs don't react to the venom the way that we do. So when your dog gets bit, it's not quite as alarming as when we get bit. But some people do react really bad from the venom. And so it's something it has to be dealt with. Party's over at that point. Hiking trip is over. You know, don't even put the tent away. Leave that for someone else. Someone else got the free tent. You just need to go. You need to make sure that if you're not in cell range, you get someplace where you have cell range.
I was in Bidwell Park in Chico with my dog, and she was running off. She was really good off leash, and she comes back with this giant, thing on her neck. And we freaked out and we took her back to the vet. Turns out she got bit by a snake. And knowing her, she started the fight, But but you're right. That's exactly what the vet said. They said, well, it's not as dangerous for dogs. And I never really understood why. But speaking of wildlife, more close to your home there was some news recently that condors are coming back. And I'm not sure if you read about that. I was wondering what your reaction to that is.
I'm super excited about it, and I'm really grateful that the Yurok tribe is taking a leading role on this, because it's interesting. Like, I'm science trained, so I love the idea of having like apex predators and scavengers and like the pieces that make an ecosystem function. I love seeing them returned. It's called rewilding or restoration. I love that. But just having a scientific relationship with nature is only part of it. A lot of people have spiritual relationships, or just like a relationship that's not spiritual, but they love to be. And I think that any type of relationship is really good. And one of the things that when the colonists came over here, they never tried to understand the relationship that indigenous people had with the land. And the Yurok people were one of the last contacted, and they still have a lot of their traditions in place. And I work with Yurok tribal members. Some of my coworkers in state parks are Yurok descendants, and they tell their own stories and teach me stuff all the time. And we actually have an on Zoom series coming up. I think the first one's going to be May 6th, where it's going to be me and Skip Lowry, who's a Yurok descendant, talking about like Yurok relationships. And the condor is going to be in one of the episodes. So tune in for that. But the relationship that indigenous people have with wildlife is so incredibly special and interesting, and just makes this this process of reintroducing the condor so much more meaningful, that I think we should all be paying attention to what's happening with the reintroduction of the condor, what that meant to the Yurok people, how they feel about it being reintroduced, because the way they see nature and the way they see condors and stuff is like hard for us to even, as a Westerner, it's really hard for me to even grasp. And so right. I like seeing, like, I like to hear Skip talk about it, and I like to see that, like, this, it's like a family member to them, and it's coming back. It's like nothing short of spectacular, wonderful. I'm super stoked this is happening. I love all the partners and the government agencies and biologists and the Yurok tribe that are working together to make it happen. I cannot wait to see a condor fly in Humboldt County.
Such a cool story, and obviously a fascinating bird. Speaking of the Yurok, I mean, they've been in the news a ton lately, and they've been doing some great stuff. Salmon restoration. You said you worked on salmon. What's your thoughts on the state of salmon up in the North Coast there, and I guess sort of on the entire West Coast in general?
Well, coming up is what are they called? The Ill River. I think it's Earwig that's doing it, but there's going to be Fridays at 5:00. There's going to be some webinars on the state of the salmon. So you guys might want to interview them about that. I think Isaac Mikas, you might want to contact him, or Pat Higgins. Pat Higgins is doing it. So we need a lot of focus, a lot more money, focus, and education around salmon habitat restoration, because salmon have had a relationship with humans for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and a really cool relationship. And I won't tell all the stories, but maybe sometime, you can interview like Skip or someone to tell the stories from the Yurok tribe. But they have wonderful relationship and stories around salmon. And, since, my ancestors came here, they saw this land as everything was like needed to be quantified into dollar amount. They came here greedy for gold, and when they couldn't get gold, they started looking at other things and commoditizing, putting a price on everything. So, how much can we make from redwood trees? And they cut them down to there was 4.6%. How much can we make on salmon? they're probably less than 4.6% of their original now. And so we have, salmon, which used to be like incredible. You hear all the old stories. We used to walk across their backs. There'd be so many.
Yep.
I don't know if that was ever true, but there was a lot. And now there's coho are extinct from most of the rivers they used to live in, coho salmon. And, we can do better. We are people who can land on Mars and take a picture, so surely we can keep this planet healthy. And I think that salmon is one of the indicator species of what kind of people we are. So right now we suck, as managers, as people having a relationship with nature, as nature itself, because humans kind of are nature observing itself. We're doing a terrible job. And we need to do better. And there's a lot of people who are doing a great job. So the shout outs to, California Fish and Wildlife, California Conservation Corps, Earwig, all of these groups, the Yurok tribe, who are doing stuff to bring back salmon. But salmon is not just an indicator of ecosystem health. It's an indicator of societal health. And when something can provide so much food during hard times, and you're not trying to bring it back, I mean, even just from that level, like you always want to have a rainy day fun. I mean, if you're not going to look at salmon as a brother, like the indigenous people do, or as a beautiful part of our ecosystem, which people like me do, at least look at it as, if hard times befell our country, we could have this wonderful food source in salmon, and all we have to do is clean up our messes, okay? And restore the ecological natural processes. That's all we got to do. And it's going to take money, it's going to take education, but it really is an indicator of what kind of people we are. Because if things are going extinct on your watch, you suck.
Very well put. We do a lot on the Klamath River dams. We write and talk a lot about it. And it comes down to there's pro dam people and anti dam people, and for us, we're right in the middle. Some dams are very important, and other dams are obsolete and are destructive to nature, right? And so I think it's all about educating people on these topics and explaining the difference between a hydroelectric dam versus a dam for water storage and all that good stuff. So very well put. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Although I know you do this all the time, so I don't think it's going to be that difficult for you. Tell me your favorite part of the Humboldt Redwoods State Park.
Okay, I thought you were going to ask me to dance. I'm like, no, he's not going to ask me to dance.
You gave us a little preview earlier. That's enough for me.
Okay. What's my favorite part of the park?
Yeah.
Woo! That is a really tough question because it changes all the time. This is I hope this doesn't disappoint anybody, but of course I love the redwoods. Of course I love old growth redwoods. But what I like are ecotones. I like where, ecosystems kind of melt into each other. And in Humboldt Redwood State Park, we have some incredible prairies. And some of them are encircled by very large redwood trees. Some of them are encircled by Doug firs. Some of them have great big oaks in them. But I love prairies. It's such a biodiverse place. Prairies are, and the edges of prairies. So we have a bunch of prairies in the park, and we're trying to restore them because the Sinkyone people who lived here for thousands of years and still do, they used to do frequent burns. And then when the colonizers came here, they stopped the Native American burning. And so a lot of those prairies started to close up because Doug firs will take over. Because, kind of like prairies and stuff are kind of like preserving the old Ice Age environment. And the Ice Age environment had a lot of prairies and grasslands and megafauna and cool diversity of medicinal and berry plants and stuff like that. And so I think when people saw that disappearing because of conifers, maybe they decided to start using fire. That's not what the Native Americans say, but that's like what some scientists may believe. So they burnt to keep these prairies open because they recognize the biodiversity. And my coworker Skip has a wonderful story about why your rocks burned that is definitely worth listening to if you guys want to interview him sometime. So I like prairies. I like fire. I like that we're reintroducing the fire to some of our prairies. And I wish we had more funding to take out the dug firs before they shade out the oak trees, because we're losing oak woodlands, and oak woodlands in this park are also beautiful. We're losing them to the being shaded out by the dug firs because of the lack of fire. So it'd be nice if we could get in there and do more removal of the dug fir trees. And I actually did that here in this park with the California Conservation Corps over the last many, many years. So I think beginning in 2001, and then the last project I did here was probably doing prairie restoration was probably 2014, 15. So prairies. Long story short, I like the prairies.
I'm really glad you mentioned the fire, because that area's seen some fire, and of course, Big Basin Redwoods had their big fire last summer. What happens when this area gets hit by fire? What can we expect to see from like a redwood forest after a fire goes through it over the next 5 years or so?
We know redwood forests are so uniquely adapted to fire. It's amazing. They've been on the planet for a long time. And, when sometimes the older you get, you go through a bunch of problems, you get pretty resilient at dealing with problems. And if you are a resilient old person, you're pretty powerful and wise. And I kind of look at redwoods that way, through that kind of like anthropomorphic lens. They've been through a lot of stuff and they're resilient. They've survived. And that includes tons and tons of fires. And now, most recently, in the last couple hundred years, the fires the coast redwoods have survived have been human set. There's not a lot of lightning strikes here compared to the Sierras. So the fires we have here and the fire scars we have and the fire return interval that we have is because of humans. So it's important to point that out, because a lot of what you see, a lot of the fire scars you see here, and a lot of those open goosepin trees, the reason why we have those is because of frequent fires. Those open goosepin trees don't happen with one fire. They happen with several fires, and those fires were set by the Sinkyone people. So what happens here is redwoods have really thick bark, and there's no sap in it, very little sap in it. So the bark isn't flammable. So when other trees like dug firs are like, and getting burnt up, the redwoods are just like, I'm cool, it's chill, it's nice and warm. And they don't burn. Only the little tiny ones, redwoods burn, and maybe, and some dead trees burn. But most redwoods, mature redwoods, can survive a really hot fire, okay? So what happens is a lot of the undergrowth burns, and then the sticks on the ground burn and things like that, clears it out. And then a lot of California plants are, they're pyrophilic. They like fire. They're fire followers, or they don't even like knobcone pines and some other plants. Even lodgepole pines has two types of cones, but the knobcone pine has one type of cone that only opens if the wax gets burned off. So like the land wants fire, and the redwoods want fire. And so we've been excluding fire, and that's a lot of the reasons why we're now having these catastrophic fires. If we would have listened to and treated with respect and had a whole different way of dealing and meeting the indigenous people, we wouldn't be having town destroying fires today, because we would have never excluded fire. Fire is good for the redwood forest. Fire is great for our prairies. Fire is good for most of California, frequent fires. Northern California is suffering from a lack of fires. Southern California is a different story because it's chaparral and blah, 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 and I don't want to speak to that. But Northern California is suffering from a lack of fires, and the redwood ecosystem welcomes and prospers from frequent fires.
Yeah, and we might see some more coming up with the drought this year. Well, I feel like I have so many things I want to ask you, but I think we're going to have you back on again, and we'll just continue this conversation. I do have to ask you, because I'm super curious. You have your state park hat on right now, but you usually wear this Indiana Jones style hat. How did you? There you are. How did you get into that hat game? Because I love it, and it's sort of become your calling card.
Yes. Yeah, I'm at work right now, and so I need to make a plug. Since I'm at work, I told my boss I'd make a plug. So I have to do this right now, and then we'll talk about my hat. Centennial anniversary. This is Humboldt Redwood State Park's centennial anniversary, and the last Saturday every month we interview people. And so I interviewed the director, or we interviewed the director of state parks. We interviewed the president, CEO of Save the Redwood League. I interviewed the Wassermans who wrote Who Saved the Redwoods, which is about the women who saved the Redwoods, which we could do a whole podcast on by itself.
Oh yeah,
super interesting story. And so it's our centennial anniversary. We would love to see people come to the park this year, celebrate this amazing, unique, old growth island of forest that has no comparison in the world. This place has more biomass, organic material per acre than anywhere on the planet, more than the Amazon rainforest. Okay, and people protected this so you could come out and enjoy it. And it's the 100th anniversary of that protection. So there's my plug. So what did you?
So that way, so it was founded in 1921 then.
1921. This is our 100-year anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah, I could do math. I shocked myself there. No, that's great. So you guys are just doing are these in-person events, or are they virtual?
Well, unfortunately, because of COVID, we're not able to do a lot of the stuff that we originally planned, which would have been
sure.
But we are going to have September 14th is Biodiversity Day. And so we are going to have hopefully that will be far enough along for COVID vaccines that we're going to have like a bio blitz in the park where you take an iNaturalist app and you come out of the park and you discover things, and it's so much fun. And then we'll have like a little talk around that. And then we're going to do we're going to have a Halloween party / centennial party and a Christmas party / centennial party, because we think that will be far enough where there's enough people vaccinated. But we're not able to do what we would love to do, and that is to have like some shindigs and some dances and stuff like that around for the centennial anniversary, because it is really remarkable. I mean, how much time do we have left? Because
no, keep talking. Hey, we're good.
So the story of how this park became a park is epic. It really doesn't have there's no story similar, and it would take me a really long time to tell you, but I'll just tell you the high points is that the public land trust movement started here through the memorial grove. So now there's public land trust, but that model was created here. This California State Park system started here because of this place. Like there were some state parks, like Yosemite was a state park first, and Big Basin, and then Yosemite became a national park. But in order to match Rockefeller's funds, they had to start a state park system. So this place was the birthplace of public land trust movement, the state park system, women's groups. This is all in the book Who Saved the Redwoods, if you want to check it out. It's by the Wassermans. But the women's groups that had no political muscle at all and were just starting to get, the right to vote, they organized, and they had two purposes. The California Women's League had two purposes in the early 1900s. One was education and the other one was forestry, because women were allowed to have garden clubs, and so they just took their garden club and turned it into conservation. So a lot of our very first conservation groups were women's groups, and that kind of got lost in history, which is tragic, and I'm glad that I get to be part of mitigating that now. So it was women's groups, local women's groups, like Humboldt County women's groups, like the wives of loggers, the daughters of timber and wives of timber company owners, that saved a lot of these redwoods, along with Save the Redwood League. And then the Save the Redwood League story is super interesting. You guys might want to watch the interview with Sam Hodder that we have on our North Coast Redwoods District YouTube page, because the three founders who come up with millions of dollars and bought helped buy a lot of these with the women's groups, they were like eugenicists. So these guys were like trying to like scientifically legitimize white supremacy. So they have this really dark, like creepy part of them, even though they were out there saving redwoods and buffalo. They saved a lot of things, these guys, but they were in this, totally different weird mindset. And so like a lot of conservation history is encapsulated in this park, and it shows how it's evolved and where its roots were. And it's a fascinating story that could best be told by understanding the history of Humboldt Redwood State Park.
Interesting. I've read about the women's group. Was the land trust? That's what you said. Like the land trust model sort of started there. Was that because of the logging in the forest, and they realized like they're messing this beautiful place up?
You know what actually kicked off the Save the Redwood movement was Highway 101, and cars, because rich people who had cars and wanted to go for a drive drove through miles of clear cuts to get to an old growth forest, and were like, oh no. So the other big, besides the women's groups and Save the Redwood League, the other really big group of people were the motor clubs that helped save this place, because they were driving through and they're like, this place is amazing. And then they would drive through all these being cut, and these redwoods that were being cut down here weren't going to houses. They were going to grape stakes. They were cutting down 380-foot tall trees that were over 2,000 years old to make grape stakes. Okay. And so it's kind of like taking apart one of the founders said it's like taking apart your grandfather clock to make kindling for a campfire. And so when people realized, that the redwoods in this area weren't going to houses, they were going to grape stakes, it really galvanized, some commitment by people. But I don't think that if the Highway 101 wouldn't have been being built, I think we would have lost all the redwoods before anybody spoke up. I mean, there was people speaking up, but I don't think they would have had enough momentum to save the 4.6% that we have left, because the women's groups were definitely already trying to save redwoods. And the women's groups, just for the Humboldt Coast listeners, the women's groups, their first attempts all failed. They tried to save Carson Woods. They tried to get it turned into a national park back in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and Carson Woods got logged and is now the town of Fortuna and Ronerville Park. But that was their first major campaign, and they lost. So when the Save the Redwood League came and the motor club came and joined forces with them, these women were unapologetic, and they were very, very determined. In fact, one of them, Laura Mahan, I don't have any tattoos, but if I was to get a tattoo, it'd be of Laura Mann. She was badass, okay? And she was the first person to do civil disobedience to save, first non-Indigenous person to do civil disobedience to save nature. And she did that by going out to an area that her group was trying to buy, and PL was like, well, we'll just cut a railroad through this. And she was like, no. And she jumped on a stump, and she's wearing those long black dresses that women wore in the 20s, and she's 56 years old, and she's all in that big dress, and she's like, you will not. And she stood on that stump and stood in front of the trees falling until her husband can go up to Eureka and get a judge to issue an injunction. So forest activism by Americans was started in Humboldt County. Surprise, surprise.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are a gem, Griff. You are a gem inside of a gem, inside of a great forest. You got to tell. So yes. Is the hat? Is that Indiana Jones? What inspired your hat?
I've always wore brown hats since I was 18 years old, since I joined the CCC, when I left that old life behind and all that unhealthiness. So when I lived in the city, I kind of looked like a hip hop kid, because even back before like hip hop was mainstream, white kids were doing, I was like the only white kid. So I looked like white LL Cool J up until I was 18 years old. And then when I got into Ukiah and stuff and started getting into nature and stuff, I kept getting burnt. So I got this big brown leather hat, and I started hanging out with some of the Redwood Summer Earth Firsters. And their like style kind of melted onto me, and pretty soon I'm wearing ponchos and beads and big hats. And the big hats never left. They have morphed throughout my life. And so this is just like a more professional looking version of the big brown leather hat that I was sporting when I was 18.
That's funny. You dress sort of like a hip hop kid, because you dance like one too.
That's where I learned. I was a break dancer in the 80s. I was white boy fresh. I was like the only white break dancer for a long time. I loved it.
That's amazing. And you know, like I said, you're bringing this cool viral look, and you're bringing it to conservation. And I think it's so cool what you do. Where can people see your videos? It's the Humboldt Redwoods State Park on Facebook, right?
So I do videos for Humboldt Redwoods State Park Facebook page, and sometimes the Instagram page too. But I'm old. I have a hard time with Instagram. And then I have @GriffWild on Facebook. So John Griff Griffith on Facebook. Not my personal. I don't post very much on my personal page, but my @GriffWild Facebook page, I post a lot. And then if you just put in John Griffith into YouTube, I have a YouTube channel. I just started resurrecting it. I didn't post anything for months and months and months, and now I'm posting regularly on it. So those are like the main things. And I have a website, thenaturenut.org, that I'm working on as we speak, getting it back in order, and then we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm a big fan of yours, and I think what we need to do is I'll come there and we'll do our next interview in person.
Sweet. I know a few good spots for the background.
Right behind you. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Griff, for coming on, and look forward to talking to you again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, and happy centennial anniversary, Humboldt Redwoods State Park. You guys come join us this summer.
Happy centennial. Thanks.
All right. Thanks to Griff for joining us. He is like just one of my favorite characters. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, if you're just listening to this and you didn't see the video of him, go look him up online because you'll recognize him. He has a ton of viral videos for his dancing. He was a break dancer in the 80s, but he's also just a wealth of knowledge, both from a wildlife perspective, from a naturalist perspective, and a Humboldt Redwoods perspective. Great guy.
Yeah, he's got a lot to say. We're absolutely going to have him back on the podcast. And maybe we'll do a video where he does some dancing. We'll see.
Yeah.
For us specifically. I mean, obviously there's a lot of dancing videos of him out there, but maybe one for us specifically.
I got the impression that a lot of people ask him to dance, and he's sick of that.
It's kind of like people asking me, what's your favorite dish to cook?
Right.
Is Gordon Ramsay really an asshole? Right.
It's eventually you you want to be known for stuff other than what you're famous for, I guess. But such a cool guy. I loved having him on. Again, we're going to try to have him on more and more. So thanks to Griff. Thank you to you for listening to the Talking NorCal podcast. We are going to continue these every week. Every Thursday, we're going to drop these. Remember to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. There's like 20 of them we're on. We're on all of them. Again, check us out on YouTube, Talking NorCal. You can watch this whole episode online. Also, Active NorCal. Follow us, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We post all these clips to those social media sites. And thank you, as always, to listening. And remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we protect nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and me, I'm hella cool, 'cause I live in Sebastopol. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and you know that we gotta go. We're